SEPHIROTH Unveiled, the cosmic system of emanation, incarnation, and return. This is Ancient the Architect, and you are now entering Ancient the Architect TV, where we do not speculate, we decode. Today's transmission concerns one of the most foundational metaphysical systems in existence, the Sephiroth, also called the numerations. That term, numerations, is not poetic. It is precise. It reflects a structural reality, that consciousness unfolds through an ordered series of operations, each governed by its own metaphysical law. The Sephiroth are 10 in number, because they correspond to 10 fixed modalities through which the infinite extends, structures, differentiates, and eventually reclaims itself. This is not theology. This is ontological mechanics. The word Sephiroth comes from the root sephar, which means to count, to declare, to make intelligible. Therefore, the Sephiroth are not symbolic forms floating in myth. They are the numerically governed intelligences of existence itself. They are the protocol of divine differentiation. To speak of Kether as the first, or Malkuth as the 10th, is not a matter of placement. It is a statement of causal rank and ontological function. Each Sephirah, each numeration, marks a distinct stage in the procession from unmanifest being to fully embodied form, and back again. They are not floating concepts. They are fixed intelligences. They form the architecture of emanation, Atzeeloooth, the logic of soul descent, Involution, the scaffolding of incarnation, Tiphereth to Malkuth, and the path of spiritual return, evolution. And so this podcast will not give you metaphors. It will give you structure. We will walk through each of the 10 Sephiroth, not poetically, but with metaphysical clarity. Each term, Binah, Tiphereth, Yesod, Shekinah, and so on, will be integrated as a functioning organ in the metaphysical body of the tree of life. This is not mysticism. This is metaphysical engineering. The Sephiroth, as a structural principle of cosmic intelligence. The term Sephiroth refers to the tenfold framework of emanated consciousness through which the absolute, unmanifest, formless, and indivisible emanates, differentiates, and structurally orders its activity within all levels of reality. The Sephiroth are not separate beings, nor mythological archetypes, but ontological modalities, specific gradations of divine intelligence expressed as vibratory strata that govern both cosmic order and psychic architecture. This structure is not abstract. It is mathematical, vibrational, and metaphysically exact. Sephiroth are the governing laws of differentiation. They constitute the fixed stages of emanation, Atzeeloooth, and correspond to the sequential descent of consciousness into increasingly defined states, from undifferentiated unity, Kether, to manifest multiplicity, Malkuth. Each Sephirah operates simultaneously on cosmic, psychological, and energetic planes. Together, the 10 Sephiroth form what might be called the divine spectrum, a full descent from absolute being to conditioned existence. Importantly, these are not mere stages of descent, but fixed metaphysical laws. They are simultaneously ontological realities, psychospiritual mechanisms, and modalities of divine self-reflection. Every plane of existence is governed by this architecture. The human soul is built upon it. Incarnation proceeds through it. Evolution reverses through it. All transformation, whether personal, planetary, or cosmic, obeys its sequence. Thus, Sephiroth is not a symbol system. It is the governing protocol of consciousness unfolding. We've clarified what the Sephiroth are. Now we must decode how they operate. The next phase is a systematic examination of the descent itself, the exact order by which divine intelligence fragments, structures, and anchors into reality through these 10 Sephiroth. 1. Kether. The crown Kether represents the primordial emission of unconditioned being into the first state of metaphysical definition. It is not personal. It is not energetic. It is existential precedence. Kether is the ontological apex, the singularity through which the absolute, Ein Sof, initiates measurable emanation. Its nature is non-dual. It is pre-differentiated will, prior even to intent or motion. Kether is seated within the Atzeeloothic world, the domain of pure emanation, in which the divine intelligence exists only as archetypal causation, untainted by mixture or form. It is here that consciousness is neither subjective nor objective, but total. This state corresponds metaphysically to Atman, or the pure spiritual essence in man. It does not think, it does not act. It simply is. And through its static omnipresence, it becomes the reference point for all dynamic descent that follows. Kether is the metaphysical root from which the polarity of Chokmah and Binah becomes possible. It is unity before duality, silence before voice, being before beingness. 2. Chokmah, wisdom. Chokmah emerges directly from Kether as the first defined motion, the primal radiation of active intelligence. It is metaphysically masculine, not in gender, but in function. It is the initiator, the principle of outward thrust, the vector of impulse. In Hermetic language, Chokmah is the second logos. It does not create form, it generates momentum. Chokmah is the basis of what esoteric systems call the word, or the creative logos, as yet unstructured. It is not creation, it is the charge behind creation. Within the cosmic structure, Chokmah becomes the internal logic behind archetypes, forms that will later be constructed by Binah. It correlates to the solar principle, light, coherence, radiative unity. Its metaphysical importance lies in the fact that it is not opposed to Binah, but presupposes Binah. The tension of opposites only begins when Binah receives Chokmah's force, but Chokmah is already directional. Thus, evolution, expansion, and emanation are latent here. This dynamic wisdom becomes the initiating pole of all consciousness projection. 3. Binah, understanding. Binah receives the force of Chokmah and gives it containment. It is the formative vessel, the cosmic womb in which the potential of wisdom acquires limitation, structure, and purpose. Binah is metaphysically feminine. It is not passive. It is receptive and structuring. In esoteric terms, Binah is the Great Mother, the origin of all substance, all pattern, all boundaries of manifestation. It is also the metaphysical ground of the Shekinah in its upper aspect, when the divine presence first takes on the work of formation. Here, the concept of divine matter emerges, not materiality in the physical sense, but the proto-substance of consciousness, the ability to be shaped. Binah defines the conditions of all future manifestation. Importantly, Binah is the highest reflection of Malkuth. These two ends of the tree of life form a polarity. What Binah holds in latent archetype, Malkuth externalizes in full manifestation. From the standpoint of metaphysical cosmology, Binah is the upper boundary of Atzeeloooth and the womb of transition into the Breeatic World, the mental plane of divine formation. 4. Chesed, Hesed, mercy, grace. Chesed is the first Sephirah of the Breeatic World, where archetypal ideas begin to manifest as intelligible, expansive qualities. It is the principle of constructive individuation, not ego, but lawful expansion of differentiated consciousness. Chesed corresponds to the individuality in the soul, the immortal monadic self that exists beyond the personality. Here, the divine begins to localize, not in limitation, but in meaningful expression. It is the domain of spiritual merit, causative virtue, and unbound growth. But this expansion must be regulated, or it destabilizes. That is why Geburah arises. Metaphysically, Chesed and Geburah are polarities of soul development, Chesed is reward. Geburah is correction. Chesed reflects the soul's movement toward the good. Its structure in the tree of life ensures that the soul is not reduced to karmic reaction alone, but is equally defined by its aspiration. Here, evolution begins as a vertical, value-based ascent toward higher synthesis. Fifth Geburah, Pahad. Severity, judgment Geburah, is the Sephirah of contraction, severity, and karmic precision. It is the mechanism by which divine intelligence corrects imbalance. It exists not as punishment, but as structural law, inviolable consequence. While Chesed provides the arc of spiritual potential, Geburah provides the boundary conditions within which that potential must unfold. It corresponds to Pahad, the emotional experience of purification. It is not just cosmic law, but internalized judgment. The soul feels the pressure of Geburah not as external imposition, but as existential resistance. Geburah is aligned with the lunar principle, not in sentimentality, but in reflective karmic mirroring. That which is cast in Chesed is echoed here as its corrective inverse. Together, Chesed and Geburah define the formative plane of soul dynamics, the ethical scaffolding on which personal evolution is either refined or arrested. 6. Tiphereth, beauty, the causal self. Tiphereth is the convergence point of all dualities below the supernal triad. It is the seat of the causal self, where the individuality, Chesed, and personality, Geburah, are brought into symmetrical coherence. It is not the ego. It is the synthesis of soul character, what occult science calls the sun, or solar king. In metaphysical anthropology, this is the true human being, the integrated moral, mental, and spiritual center of identity. Tiphereth serves as the pivot point of the entire Sephirothic structure. It mediates between upper intelligence and lower form. It is also the metaphysical origin of Incarnation. Through Tiphereth, the causal self constructs the soul vehicle that will descend into the world of personality, but it is also the location of return. All authentic spiritual development is the reactivation of Tiphereth as inner sovereignty. Tiphereth reflects the divine pattern within man. It is the soul's golden mean. 7. Netzach, victory. Netzach represents the principle of enduring emotional force, volitional energy directed toward continuity of aspiration. It is not sentiment. It is emotional momentum grounded in the soul's higher impulses. Functionally, Netzach is the transmitter of spiritual endurance. It carries the imprint of Tiphereth's causal intention into the world of effective experience. In the metaphysical structure of the soul, this is the energetic layer where values become desire, and desire becomes directed intention. It corresponds to the lower Buddhic field, the level at which love, devotion, and sacrifice are activated not in abstract idealism, but in sustained interior force. Netzach, when imbalanced, becomes addiction, escapism, or blind emotion. But properly oriented, it is the mechanism through which divine ideals become motive force in incarnation. As a Sephirah, it acts in polarity with Had, ensuring that neither emotional force nor intellectual analysis operate in isolation. Together, they form the infrastructure of the psyche. 8. Hod, glory. Had is the intellectual counterpart to Netzach, the domain of rational structuring, symbolic language, and logical form. In metaphysical psychology, it is the organ of reflection and analytical discernment. Where Netzach pushes forward emotionally, Had pulls inward intellectually. But it does not originate thought. It receives archetypal impulse from higher Sephiroth and renders it into systems, categories, language, and models. It corresponds to the lower Manasic field, the reflective mind that can either be illumined or bound by its own constructs. In soul evolution, Had is critical. It enables the soul to articulate, understand, and eventually transcend its patterns. but when unbalanced, it leads to dogma, rationalism, and spiritual paralysis. Netzach and Hod must always be viewed together. They form the dual infrastructure by which the inner becomes communicable, and the communicable remains aligned with essence. 9. Yesod. Foundation. Yesod is the integrative field that collects all previous Sephirothic energies and conditions them into patterns capable of being imprinted upon the material world. It is the domain of the subtle body, the astral matrix, and the memory field of the soul. It is not creative in itself, it is reproductive, meaning that it holds, stabilizes, and transfers pattern. In metaphysical anthropology, Yesod is the psychic gateway through which the entire spiritual structure is translated into incarnation. It is the final stage before physicalization and corresponds directly with the karmic template. That is, the vibrational structure that determines which causal qualities are made manifest in any given lifetime. Yesod is the seat of repetition and recurrence. It governs the cyclical nature of rebirth, the reanimation of unresolved psychic tendencies, and the soul's subconscious magnetism. In spiritual discipline, Yesod is where purification of the subconscious must occur. Without this, all higher aspiration becomes distorted at the threshold of embodiment. 10th. Malkuth. The kingdom. Malkuth is the terminus of descent, the outer shell of manifestation, the physical world, the condition of embodied experience. It is not simply the material plane. It is the executive surface of all Sephirothic operations. Every force, value, and archetype from above culminates here in a single test. Will it hold under the pressure of matter? Malkuth is also the domain of Shekinah, the immanent presence of the divine within creation. While Shekinah has aspects in Binah and the higher planes, it is in Malkuth where Shekinah becomes most vital. It is the hidden fire within the external world, the evolutionary intelligence latent in matter itself. Importantly, Malkuth is not separate from the upper Sephiroth. It is their expression under the maximum conditions of density. The soul experiences here not fall, but pressure, and that pressure is the necessary condition for the reawakening of the ascent. Malkuth completes the circle. It is both product and portal. It is here that evolution begins. Let us now close this structural exposition by integrating the three essential dynamics: involution, evolution, and Shekinah. Involution refers to the descent of divine consciousness into matter, not as degradation, but as intentional compression. Through the Sephiroth, spirit gradually encodes its qualities into denser and denser conditions, resulting in localized consciousness, the individualized soul. Each Sephirah marks a further stage in this intentional descent, where unity becomes plurality, archetype becomes form, and formless awareness becomes embodied cognition. Involution is not accidental. It is the divine sacrifice, the willing limitation of the infinite to experience and ultimately transform the finite. Evolution. Evolution is the return, the reactivation of latent divinity within the structure of experience. The soul, having descended, begins to ascend, not by fleeing the lower, but by transmuting it. Each Sephirah now becomes a stage not of descent, but of integration. The soul reclaims its higher faculties, purifies distortion, stabilizes the causal self, Tiphereth, and reorients toward the supernal triad. Evolution reverses entropy. It is the restoration of alignment between the personal and the eternal. Shekinah is the operational presence of the divine throughout both processes. In involution, Shekinah sustains coherence within descent. In evolution, Shekinah is the inner fire guiding the soul's ascent. Shekinah is not sentimental. It is structural immanence, the guarantee that every stage of the journey, even in the most externalized condition, Malkuth, contains the seed of return. Shekinah ensures that the Sephiroth are not merely a model, but an active mechanism for spiritual realization. She is the living current within the tree. Now that we've completed the descent through all 10 Sephiroth and integrated each phase of consciousness, each law of emanation, and each principle of soul architecture, there's one final layer we need to address. Not a new concept, but a unifying synthesis. Because the tree of life is not just a descent, it is a return. And without understanding that return, the forces of evolution, the role of Shekinah, and the meaning of involution itself, the entire system remains theoretical. So before we close, let's bring all of this into alignment. The Sephiroth are not metaphor. They are the structural logic of consciousness itself. They are not merely symbolic tools for mystical contemplation. They are the governing mechanics by which spirit unfolds into existence, sustains its multiplicity, and returns to its source in perfected form. Each Sephirah, Kether through Malkuth, is not a layer of doctrine, but a vibrational organ of the universal body. And each associated force, Binah, Tiphereth, Yesod, Shekinah, is not auxiliary to the system. They are essential vectors in the soul's internal architecture. To study the Sephiroth is to enter into contract with divine intelligence. You are no longer observing the cosmos. You are decoding its source code. You are not dealing with theology. You are studying the protocol of God becoming form, and the exact stages through which that form becomes God again. And this is the secret. The tree was never external. It has always been the internal ladder of your own becoming. To know the Sephiroth is to know what part of the infinite you are operating from, at every stage of your soul's movement. It is to know why you suffer, why you repeat, why you evolve, and ultimately, how to reconstruct your soul into full coherence with its origin. There is no spiritual system higher than this, because this is not a belief system. This is the metaphysical law of emanation, individuation, incarnation, and return. This is ancient the architect. And what we've just explored is not mysticism. It is the blueprint of the divine mind in motion,